Good morning, I'm Norah O'Donnell, and as we continue our Earth Matters series on this Earth Day, I'm pleased to welcome former Secretary of State John Kerry to our CBS This Morning Toyota Green Room. Welcome. As Secretary of State, we should point out, under President Obama, Kerry was instrumental in the 2016 signing of the International Paris Climate Agreement. Last year, the Trump administration announced its intent to withdraw from the agreement. Secretary, good morning.
Good morning.
Why have you made fighting climate change one of your great missions?
Well, I've been involved in public life now for, 45, 50 years. Of all the issues we've ever been involved in, and I've been involved with nuclear weapons, with cyber, with terrorism, this is the single most challenging security issue for everybody on the planet. It's life and death, and people need to tune into that more. It's very hard for people to grapple with it because they think, oh my God, it's too big, I can't do anything about it. But the point is, everybody can and must, and most importantly, this is most important, it's not a choice between doing something for the environment and having a job or living comfortably. The future will be defined by clean energy, alternative energy, renewable energy. That's a certainty. Electric cars, a certainty. And the issue is, how quickly are we going to do this? Will we do it in time to minimize the great damage that is being done now?
To those who say, well, I don't see climate change, we've had the last 4 warmest years on Earth ever. Alaska, the warmest March it's ever had by a lot. Right. I mean, we can go on and on. There's a report today in the Associated Press that Hawaii's Waikiki Beach, where my parents honeymooned, could soon be underwater because of rising sea levels. The threat is real.
Miami, I mean, you can run around the world and identify the cities that will absolutely find major floods. They're having sunny day floods today, nowadays. In Boston, we have a seawall, and on a sunny day at a high tide, you can see water coming up over the flood. Most people are predicting that with the melting that's currently taking place in the Arctic and Antarctic itself, we're going to have about 3 feet sea level rise in the course of this century. That's a century. But we're now learning that the ocean is warming 40% faster than it was 10 years ago. We're learning that the Greenland ice sheet is melting 4 times faster than it was 10 years ago. So everything has accelerated. The storms are more intense. The fires are more intense because there's a cycle of rain and growing brush and then more tinderbox, and then it ignites. So the challenge, but what's exciting, Nora, is if we move rapidly now to embrace alternative technologies and make choices, we can beat this. It can actually become the biggest marketplace the world has ever seen, create millions of jobs. Huge amounts of money will be made by the people who are smart enough to go into the new technologies. Absolutely.
Explain what the Paris Agreement would collectively do in terms of all of the nations that signed on.
Well, the Paris Agreement, we worked, after years of failure, we went to Paris and we negotiated with the Chinese. I went to China, we negotiated with the Chinese. We finally got the Chinese to be cooperative, not opposed to us. That created an entirely new dynamic. So President Obama and President Xi were able to stand up in Beijing and announce to the world 2 years ahead of Paris, this is what we're going to do. We're going to reduce our emissions. Then Europe followed. And then 196 countries came to Paris and said, we're all going to reduce our emissions. But it was a voluntary agreement, nothing mandatory. So the real thing we believed we were doing in Paris was not guaranteeing that we're going to hold the Earth's temperature to 2 degrees centigrade. What we guaranteed was the marketplace is going to get excited. People are going to invest. And guess what? The next year, for the first time in history, more money, $350 billion, was invested in alternative and renewable energy rather than fossil fuel. So solar is now cheaper than coal. It's about 88% reduction in the cost of solar. Wind is about 69% cheaper than it was 10 years ago. Everything's happening faster. It's what technology does. So if we will embrace this and make wise decisions, we can get ahead of the curve. If we don't embrace it, there will be literally trillions of dollars of damage, and we will lose lives, many lives. People are already dying because of climate change. It will happen. There'll be refugees, food
shortages,
interruption. There'll be water interruption that's going to become and if you think migration is a challenge today, you already see people leaving Guatemala and Honduras because of climate change. They can't grow things where they used to. So I think it's, without alarming anybody, and I'm not alarmist because I see so many good things that we can do that will help people.
Then why the pushback? Why the pushback? Why from President Trump?
It's ideological, and frankly, it's short-sighted, and it's stupid, and it's dangerous. President Trump's decision to pull out of Paris will cost lives of Americans. It will cost billions of dollars. And I'll give you an example. Last year, we spent, or 2 years ago now, we spent $265 billion cleaning up after 3 storms.
Yes.
Harvey in Texas dropped more water in 5 days than goes over Niagara Falls in an entire year. It's an unprecedented, it's what they called a once in 50,000 year flood, but it's now happening more frequently. And Maria, the other storm, devastated Puerto Rico, and Irma was the first hurricane to have sustained winds over 185 miles an hour for 24 hours.
This is affecting every taxpayer.
More intense.
Every taxpayer in terms of bailing out and cleaning up.
Taxpayers are already paying the money. And there are countless economic analyses that show it is cheaper to make the investments and do the things we need to do now to prevent the damage than it is to wait for the damage. I mean, the global GDP is about $280 trillion today. Scientists and economists, William Nordhaus at Yale just won the Nobel Prize for economics for this analysis, shows that if we don't do things at the rate that we're not doing them today, and this compounds, the cost to the world will be twice the global GDP today. So everything compels us to move in this direction, except we have a president who doesn't read, doesn't understand the science, and has ideologically decided to side with the deniers who literally don't know what they're talking about.
What's the single greatest thing an individual can do to help fight climate change?
Vote, vote, and vote. I mean, the simple reality is the turnout when President Trump was elected was 54.2%. When I ran for president against Bush in 2004, the turnout was about 60.3%. When Obama won in 2008, it was about 63%. So you see the difference.
Right.
If you don't vote, you get what you don't vote for. And the point is that in the United States of America, of all places in the world, the greatest democracy, we're the ones who encourage and market democracy to other countries. And I think it's great we do. But we're not living our own democracy particularly effectively right now.
What industries are the biggest contributors to climate change?
The biggest contributors to climate change are transportation and the production of electricity. We have to move to electric cars, to clean cars, move away from combustion, and we have to get away from fossil fuel in the production of electricity, and we can do that.
But even the Democratic Party and those running for president, not even a majority of them support taxes, a carbon tax.
Yes, well, many people do. There are different forms of a carbon tax, but it's bipartisan. Secretary of State Jim Baker and former Secretary of State George Shultz have put out a plan, which in principle, I support the framework of the plan. There are details in it we need to try to work out. But it prices carbon. And if you price carbon, then people will begin to make different choices based on the cost of products that contain carbon or come from carbon. Other countries do more of that. I mean, we need to be undertaking greater effort. In Paris, we created something called Mission Innovation. China signed up to it. India signed up to it. And 23 other countries and the European Union. We're pushing technology in this effort because one of the things we're going to actually have to do is something called negative emissions. If we're really going to get ahead of this, we have to be able to take carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. So the whole concept of how do you do that and what do you do with it is an enormous part of the research we need to be doing.
And what do you do to do that?
Well, there are ways you can capture carbon. We do capture carbon today.
More plants.
There are companies that are currently using captured carbon to put back into the earth, and it pushes oil out. So it's called an enhanced oil production process. So it actually helps you retrieve oil that you couldn't retrieve otherwise. there are other, people put it into concrete, and it could be stored in a building in the context of, there are different ways people are exploring. We haven't found the magic key yet, but the key is to be working at it, because one thing I know, when the United States puts its mind to going to the moon or to trying to reduce AIDS in Africa, and we're on the brink of the first generation of children being born AIDS-free, that's us.
Yeah.
We can do these things. It's in our DNA, and we got to go do it.
Which became a bipartisan effort, by the way.
It was bipartisan. Yes,
Yes.
it was. It was bipartisan from the beginning, actually. Bill Frist and I, he was then Senate Majority Leader, passed the first AIDS legislation, which then became, and we did it with Jesse Helms' support, and it became PEPFAR under President Bush, and it's a great success.
You have, led by Congressman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the Green Deal, which the goal is to have 100% clean energy by 2030. Is that realistic? And is it realistic that Americans will pay for it?
Let me just say, first of all, because everybody has been attacking her, and I think very unfairly, she's had the courage to stand up and put forward an aspiration. And it's a generalized statement of an aspiration, not a specific piece of legislation. But actually trying to achieve a completely carbon-free, alternative renewable society by 2010 is not possible. We just can't do that yet. What we're aiming for, former Secretary Ernie Moniz, Secretary of Energy, he and I are working on something which we hope to be able to announce in a few weeks. And it's a major proposal and a major initiative that we think can really help change the politics right now. But what we're talking about—
What would that include?
Well, what we're talking about, more importantly, is setting a goal by 2050. Gives us 30 years, approximately, to move to a low-carbon, no net carbon society. And I say no net carbon because there will be offsets. You're going to be using gas as a bridge fuel for a virtuous grid, for instance. When you don't have wind, you don't have sun, you don't have hydro, you're going to need something to keep the TV cameras working and so forth, and our industry. And that's doable. Plus, we are now becoming far, far more advanced in battery storage. If we can break the secret of really big battery storage in small and less expensive form, then solar becomes a massive, massive alternative for everybody. But you have to be able to do something for those times when you just don't have the sun.
Finally, Secretary Kerry, I think we're now up to 20 Democrats running for president.
Yeah, I'm counting, huh?
And the most ever running for president.
Yeah.
Joe Biden will make 21 if he enters on.
Well, Joe is qualified and obviously should be running. I don't want to get into a commentary on everybody, but I don't think this is helpful for the Democratic Party. I don't think it's particularly helpful for the country. I think it's helpful to have a healthy primary, but as many candidates as we have today, I think is complicated for voters and complicated for the raising of money. And
you think it hurts the Democratic Party or the
Well, it has the
nominee?
potential to. I don't think it has yet, but it certainly has the potential to if people start going after each other. And if there's a polarization within the party that it becomes a wound too hard to heal, we have to be careful of that. I'm hoping that won't happen. I pray it won't happen.
But we heard the former President Barack Obama, who you served with, say that it's almost close to becoming, I think, what was the word he used?
A circular firing squad. Democrats historically have been pretty good at
avoiding
shooting at each other. I hope that won't happen. I think most of the candidates that I've taken note of thus far are focused on important issues. I think there are a lot of good ideas being put on the table. I think they're doing a good job of promoting the thinking, but clearly, I mean, what does it mean if you wind up with a nominee who basically was narrowed down by, in the teens of percentage point of support? I don't think it builds the momentum and effort to get. But let's see what happens. There are people still getting in. I'm looking forward to Joe's announcement. We'll see where we are.
Well, Secretary Kerry, nice to have you here. You celebrated the first Earth Day.
I was there working on the first Earth Day, and I was chairman of New England Earth Day in 1990. And whatever Ernie and I are doing now, we'll coordinate very closely with Earth Day and all the people involved in that, and every other environmental group out there, because we need everybody on deck. It has to become a voting issue. How do you make it a voting issue? You've got to connect people to how their lives are affected by what's happening, how their pocketbook is affected, but also show them this does not mean a choice between their job or their comfort level or their quality of life. All of that can get better. More jobs, better pay, better lifestyle, longer life, less cancer, less pollution in the air. I mean, they're all the side benefits that just don't get talked about. And we're going to see to it that they are talked about.
Always great to see you,
Happy to be
Secretary
with
Kerry.
you.
Nice to
Thank
see you.
you.
Happy Earth Day.
Thank you. Same to you. My pleasure to be here.